In this video, I am going to talk about the structural organization of the body. So that's how our body is built and designed evolutionarily. And this tells us sort of how our structure impacts our function. And so when I say a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 alignment, this is true for both the upper extremity and the lower extremity. Now, the lower extremity and the upper extremity might have different functions within themselves. So the lower extremity is more built for locomotion and the joint structure is set up for that. And the upper extremity is built for more mobility and gripping things, prehensile tasks. But both of them, from a very evolutionary and from our kind of earliest cellular development, have a very similar structure of one major bone that connects back to the axial skeleton, and then that sort of trickles down into more and more bones as you go. So at the upper extremity, we have our humerus, which then connects into the scapula directly back to the body. The humerus connects down at the elbow joint into the radius and ulna. Then we get into the more proximal part of the hand, the scaphoid, lunate, and triquetrum. That connects to the four bones of the distal part of the carpal bones. And then lastly, we have our metacarpal. Metacarpal is in our phalanges. Now, this structure is very important because you've probably heard the term gross motor versus fine motor. And the hand, which has a lot more bone structure and joint structure in it, is going to be more of our fine motor task. So to reach and grab something very precisely or to touch something lightly, it's a lot easier to do because of this amount of sensory input that we get from our hand, but also from the physical structural makeup of the hand. So we have all these bones and everything in the hand to allow us to do very dynamic sort of movements where, we can turn our body in various ways. As we get more into the gross motor function of the upper extremity, the arm, the shoulder it's the most overall mobile joint in the body, but it's one major joint that connects back to the body. So we have bigger muscle groups here that they perform a much different function than the smaller muscles and the smaller joints that the hand has to do. So in the upper extremity, we have the shoulder, elbow down to the hand. That's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in the lower extremity, we have our femur that connects to the tibia and fibula at the knee joint. And for this reason too, upper extremity, lower extremity, you can see that where the one bone connects to the two bones is primarily going to be a hinge joint there. Yeah, the elbow has slight other accessory movement. The knee has some tibial internal and external rotation. But because of that setup, we take from one major bone at the femur, for example, down to the two bones that make up the knee joint. Then we go into our hind foot, our talus, calcaneus, and navicular. That's going to be our setup for getting into pronation and supination. That's going to pair with the midfoot, the cuneiforms, the 1, 2, and 3, and the cuboid. And then lastly, we have our metatarsals in the foot. And the metatarsals then connect with the phalanges. So the metatarsals don't have as much mobility because we need to be able to load our entire body weight step over step again. But there's still that same makeup of the body of how our metacarpals and our metatarsals, there's a lot more bone and joint structure to then allow for a very different function than what has to happen more proximally up at the knee, up at the hip, or in the upper extremity at the elbow and the shoulder. So I think this is a helpful principle when we talk about rehabbing different injuries, thinking about this as what's the closer to the body, the gross motor function that needs to happen and the stability that needs to happen around those joints is going to be much different than the training, the type of stability that we need as we get more distal and further away from the body.